Y'all know Anger, right? Anger is a 4-mana incarnation with haste that gives all of our other creatures haste so long as it's in our graveyard and we control a mountain. It's a really popular and powerful card. Anger is part of a cycle of similar creatures from Judgment, with Brawn giving Trample, Filth, Swamp Walk, Valor, First Strike, and Wonder flying. Each of these cards costs 4 mana and shares the same basic idea, although Brawn is a free as opposed to the other 2/2s, and that irritates me a little bit. Either way, they also share similar flavor text with a small snippet from the Scroll of Beginnings. I enjoy these a lot, and a weird magic daydream of mine is to build a 5-color deck that somehow gets all of them into my graveyard and enables them to assemble Incarnation Voltron. And while that would be a lot of fun, it wouldn't be complete, because weirdly, this cycle is not made up of only 5 cards. There are actually 7. Genesis is also an incarnation from Judgment, and it has the same kind of Scroll of Beginning flavor text as the previous 5. It's a 5-mana creature that, at the beginning of our upkeep, so long as it's in our graveyard, lets us pay 3 mana to return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. I've experimented with this card a bit, and I found it to be largely underwhelming. 3 mana is just kind of a lot for creature-only regrowth with timing restrictions. But there's one more incarnation from Judgment that's absolutely incredible, and it sees basically no play. I personally don't place much emphasis on EDH because I don't think it reflects the actual experience of playing Commander in real life very well. It's just really easy to throw cards like Rhystic Study or Teferi's Protection into a Mox Field list for what amounts to little more than a thought experiment. But when actually assembling decks in real life, people tend to be a lot more selective and aware of budget. As much as I'm in favor of proxies, I don't actually play with them all that much, and most of the players I know also prefer to properly own the cards they play. So while online you can find tons of deck lists that are a couple $100 each, and an EDH rec reflects those, in reality I find that most players aren't actually playing decks like that. Of course, your experience may vary a bit there, and I think that also just kind of depends on how long the people that you've been playing with have been playing for. Collections just kind of accumulate over time. However, I do think EDH rec is useful for gauging the awareness of the general populace of specific cards. And that brings us to today's topic: Glory. A card that, according to EDH rec, is in 0.1% of the decks that can play it, which is just criminally low. Glory is a white 5-mana free with flying. These stats don't really matter, because its real effect begins once it's in the graveyard. While Glory is in the graveyard, we can spend 3 mana to activate it at any time, to then choose a color and give all of our creatures protection from that color until the end of turn. This effect is insane. It's repeatable protection that only costs mana. There's an entire card called Akroma's Blessing that has the exact same effect and cost, and Glory can just spam that out of the graveyard without any restrictions. Protection is a very powerful ability. It makes it so that our creatures can't be damaged, enchanted, equipped, blocked, or targeted by permanents or spells of the chosen color. Blasphemous Act? Nope. Protection red. Path to Exile? No. Protection white. Attack into my horde of weenies with a pile of green stuff? I guess you can still do that, but I can block without sacrificing my units because of Protection Green. And if our opponents are trying a 2-pronged approach using 2 colors, we can just activate it twice and block both spells. It can't even be countered properly because it's an ability. Sure, our opponents might stifle it, but even then we can just activate it again. So long as we have the mana for it, Glory creates a nearly unbeatable layer of protection at very little opportunity cost. We can even use it to keep our creatures safe from our own damage-based sweepers. It's a card that's incredibly powerful while asking for very little in return. Oh, by the way, if you've enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. That would be great. Thank you. All we need to do to be able to use Glory is complete 2 conditions. We first need to actually get it into our graveyard. And we definitely don't want to do that by just casting it, because it's a pretty terrible creature. So ideally we want to discard it, but unfortunately white isn't particularly great at discarding unless you're willing to play Possessed Goat for the Goat tier synergy, in which case I have nothing but respect for you. That's sick. On top of that, we also have to keep free mana available to pay for the ability. Free mana can be a lot to have open, especially since we might need to activate the ability more than once. Glory is powerful, but it's not particularly mana efficient. Akroma's Blessing is not a great card, especially when considering that the white-only version of this, Brave the Elements, only costs 1 mana. But mana efficiency isn't so much the point, because Glory is card efficient. It replaces a protection spell every time we activate it, and that is worth investing some effort into. If it comes to discarding Glory in mono white, that is always going to be difficult. I found the best plan to be to overdraw with cards like Secret Rendezvous and to then discard Glory to hand size. But if we're going outside of white, then of course that starts being a lot easier. Red and blue have absolutely no issue with looting cards away for value, and that makes Glory a really easy inclusion for most creature decks in those colors. And since looting it away moves it where we want it to be, the loot kind of becomes a free spell. Okay, it's not really a free spell, but now we can activate it all the time, and that saves us cards. So I guess it's like a card draw? I guess it's more of a card draw. It's not really a free spell. It's a card draw. Either way, it's a good plan. That's what I'm trying to say here. I think blue makes for a particularly amazing pairing with Glory. A blue-white flash speed, maybe flicker-based deck can always keep mana open, since it's playing at instant speed anyways, which then means that Glory is just a free option we always have available. The deck I used this card the most with was an Aragorn King of Gondor control-ish, Voltron-ish deck that played a lot of instants, so I could always just keep mana open to protect my commander if necessary, and otherwise just draw some cards or interact in a different way. We can also combine it with ability cost reducers, like Convergence of Dominion or Surda the Dawnwaker, to turn Glory into just a better Brave the Elements, at which point it starts being very, very silly. When planned for even just a little bit, Glory can actually feel quite oppressive, and in my personal circle it became kind of a notorious card because it made my board feel invincible. Now, this isn't entirely true. Classic sweepers that just destroy or exile all creatures will still hit us, but our creatures are basically immune to anything that requires targeting. This then introduces quite some political nuance to playing with Glory, and some players will get frustrated and refuse to cast their removal on anything at all, while others will still heed the impulse of using their cards and nuke our other opponents instead. This is where you'll need to read the table a little bit to figure out what the best way of handling the situation is. Sometimes it's actually preferable to let your opponents kill a few of your things so they stop focusing as much on you. But importantly, we have control over this, we get to make the choice. Glory can also be used aggressively. Protection includes making our creatures unblockable for that color. And so, if we have a strong board but our opponents have blockers, we can use Glory to give our army protection from that color and then just smack him. It's like a Rogue's Passage but for our entire board. Now, while I think Glory is a very good card, it's not flawless. It's obviously vulnerable to graveyard hate, and as already mentioned, free mana can be expensive. But it's also not the kind of card that's a pillar of a deck. It's very easy to fit, because the only commitment we really need to make sure is to ensure that we have ways of discarding it and that we are playing a deck that actually cares about our creatures. But then it's just kind of a free utility card, a protection spell that requires no effort. And if we get scoozed, then I guess that's just what happens, that's no big deal. Again, you shouldn't use Glory as kind of a cornerstone of your deck, just as a nice supporting piece. As for which theme it might fit into, I think any deck that's centered around flyers, maybe spirits or elementals as well, anything that fits into the visual aesthetic of the card. There's also the silly style of white-centered deck that's just a bunch of indestructible creatures, and then Board Vibe City. And while Glory arguably doesn't fit too well since those creatures are already supposed to be indestructible, it might add some flexibility that could be useful. We also have a total of 19 incarnations at this point. So, Incarnation Kindred? Truly, the most unhinged deck. For only €65, you too can play the worst 5-color deck imaginable. I think Glory is just kind of a cool card. It's very unique in what it does, and it's actually quite effective. It's also one of those cards where once you throw it on a table, people will be like, huh? What's that? How does that work? And I don't know about you, but I really enjoy that novelty. If I make somebody ask multiple times how a card works, and it's not because the card is super complicated, but just because it's so weird, I feel like I did a good job. I did a good job playing that card, because that's when Commander's at its best, when I get to confuse people with my intricate but well-considered deck-building decisions. Anyways, I really enjoy these videos that are just about individual cards. So if you have any suggestions for these, please let me know. You can send me an email, there's a link down in the description. You can go to my Discord, there's a link down in the description. You can just leave a comment. You can telepathically beam it straight into my mind, send me a carrier pigeon, use smoke signals. Signals? I don't know what that would be. Either way, communicate with me and we can see if you have any cool ideas. And if I like them, I'll make a video about it. So yeah. Anyways, I also have a list of other weird cards that I'm really looking forward to talking about. But I wanted to start with this one because it's one I had already played a bunch and I didn't need to test as much. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Would definitely appreciate that. Yes, I know I need a haircut. I'm getting it later this week. And for now, I'll see you guys next time.